very excited to hear about your thoughts. So the question really is, what are the mega trends of which we have to keep our eyes on as we reflect on how we've got here and how they are going to affect our efforts around immigrant integration for immigrants and for refugees? So maybe we can start with Maria Elena.
Well, hello everybody. It's great to see so many friends from across the country and to hear what everybody is doing today. For those that I don't know, I've worked with Unite here. I also led a Central Labor Council for the AFL-CIO and led my local union in Los Angeles. I don't know about mega trends, but I will share with you a few of the recent experiences of our union that have everything to do with the election promises and what all workers are facing. There was a group of workers at a casino in Las Vegas that wanted union representation. And they organized and they fought really, really hard amongst themselves, and the majority decided in a government-sponsored election that they wanted our union to represent them. That enough was enough as far as low wages, enough was enough as far as paying too much for health care, and so they voted democratically in an overwhelming majority. Those employees work for Donald Trump. But I got to hand it to the courage of those employees who said, regardless of who the boss is, that we have to organize and fight back. That in this economy, that's the only way you're going to get what you deserve. The majority were housekeepers, majority were immigrants, but alongside white workers decided to fight back, organize and fight back. In Atlantic City, New Jersey, another courageous group of workers at the Taj Mahal Casino had been represented by a union for many, many years. And it was through a string of bankruptcies declared by extremely wealthy individuals that they lost their health care, they lost the ability to maintain and to sustain good wages, and so they decided to go out on strike. In this economy, and again, against the person who is now the president-elect. Now, to me, you know, the trend should be that workers organize and fight back against the 1%. That's what should be the mega trend. And I'll tell you, and you all know this because of the work that you do every day, that immigrants, regardless of their status, are just as courageous, if not more, than native-born workers to say we deserve better and we contribute to this economy and we should do better and all the money should not be going to the 1%. So that's a mega trend that I think should be happening in this country. We all know what workers across this country are facing. You know, deepest recession we've had since we faced in 2008 since the Great Depression, a continued attack on unionization. What does that mean? Workers have less bargaining power. When workers cannot act in a collective fashion in industry after industry, what happens is it becomes lopsided, and that's what's gone on in this country. Wall Street has taken over, leading this economy, and we have a broken immigration system. You put those all together, and what's the result? Economic inequality. And that's what all of us should be battling as part of our fight every single day. So now what? Well, we've got to organize to demand better paying jobs. We've got to deal with our environment by demanding green jobs. We just won an ordinance in Los Angeles that took us 6 years, but through that ordinance, we are going to increase recycling in 70% of the waste in LA was not recycled. It's now going to be recycled. Who works in those industries? Immigrants. So we got safeguard for the workers in that ordinance as well. Those are the kinds of things that should be the mega trend. We need better trade deals that take workers into account and not just the corporations. And finally, just to say that when we do all those things, our economy gets better, and it gets better for everybody. The story of California is not just about immigrants doing better through legislation. The story of California is that we've got one of the best economies in the world, one of the healthiest economies in the world, at the same time that we respect immigrants.
Thank you, Maria Elena. So, Kalia, you're next.
Yeah, well, hello everyone. It's such an honor to be here and share with all of you. This is my 4th NIC, and it just gets better every year. And I couldn't be more excited to be here in Nashville. The first time I visited this place, I was working with an organization called the Center for New Community, which I worked with, woo woo, until last month. And you know, I'm now with the Pillars Fund, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. But when I was working with CNC, I just learned so much about what's happening other places and how we've seen the emergence of the far-right movement this year and in the support for Donald Trump. And I don't know if it's the only mega trend, because there are so many, and how can you pick just one? But there's a lot we can learn from what happened with European far-right movements and what we're seeing right now. And I think it's only fitting that this story begins and sort of ends in Nashville. So the history, and I'll talk a little bit about Islamophobia, because I do think that that's an undeniable mega trend that was woven throughout the presidential campaign. And you know, the history of Islamophobia is a lot different in Europe than it is here. There's the colonial history in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia that we just don't have. So it's entrenched in a much deeper way and in a much different way than it is here. And for a long time, politicians there across Europe have been using Islamophobia as a political platform and to win campaigns. We haven't seen that as much here until relatively recently. Of course, Islamophobia in the United States predates 9/11, but you know, it got much worse, and I think that's an understatement. So when we're thinking about Nashville specifically, and why did I bring that up? One of the far-right movements that has emerged and is part of this legacy that I mentioned in Europe is the Party of Freedom, which is based in the Netherlands. And its leader, Geert Wilders, is a prominent anti-Muslim politician. He's unapologetically anti-Muslim. He says his plan is to stop the spread of Islam, and he's not against Muslims, of course. But you know, this is his thing. This is his jam. So where does he go to spread this message and to organize with people in the United States? He came right here to Middle Tennessee. And you have to ask, well, what did he see in this space, in this region, that would make him want to organize with local activists here? And I think, of course, there was already like a pretty robust, and Turk can tell you all about this, a robust anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim movement happening here and has been here for a while. So definitely that's a hook. But the other thing is the potential of this region. And if Middle Tennessee doesn't matter for the broader trends of the United States, then why would he bother? Why would far-right European politicians come to this space if it didn't have an impact on the broader social landscape of the United States? So I think that the far-right in Europe saw something that our movements have sort of not acknowledged as much, which is the potential of this place and the power that it has. And so, we have to ask ourselves as a movement, have we been paying as much attention to the South as the far right in Europe has? Have we been paying attention to the concerns and the questions and everything that's coming up here, as it impacts the rest of the country? Now, after the election, I think people are a little bit more awake and we're all here. And so what are we going to do with that now? And I think one thing we have learned from the way that movements have pushed back against the far right in Europe is that we can't really fight this from the middle. We've got to be really, really strong and challenge the rhetoric from a really principled stance.
Thank you, Kalia. Ambassador Sada, I have a different sort of question because we've heard from you.
Not the mega trend.
Well,
No, go ahead.
I think one mega trend that we have seen, well, one trend that we have seen has been that Mexican immigration to the United States has definitely dropped off. And in fact, in some years there's been out-migration of Mexicans back to Mexico from the United States. But more and more you're seeing Mexico almost as a pathway for other Central American migrants from Honduras, from Guatemala, from El Salvador, often fleeing for their very lives. So given this trend, which does not seem to be abating, how can the United States and Mexico best deal with this trend and figure out the best way to work with these immigrants and these refugees?
As I mentioned in my remarks, Mexico is becoming every day a more important regional and global role. And this is because of various reasons. One of them is because we decided unilaterally to be open to the world. We were very protectionist. And then we started joining different regions of the world. And the last one, perhaps more important so, was North American Free Trade Agreement. But we continue to doing a lot of trade deals. As we speak, we have another one with Brazil and with Turkey and with Indonesia. So, but what is happening right now is Mexico has been transformed. And we have to understand that from a very broad perspective. Now, as you mentioned, Mexico is not producing more immigrants. Why so? Because we used to have 5 or 6 kids per family. Now, average it is 2.2. So we do not have more people, let's say. On the other hand, we have developed different regions in Mexico. Perhaps not the south of the southeast where I'm coming from Oaxaca. But yes, central and northern part of Mexico, which is now a more integrated region. And we are seeing what is happening now in other regions of the world. And Mexico has become a very unique country in the sense that we are a country of origin, of a transit, of destiny and return of immigrants. So we have all the characteristics. What we are seeing just at the border between Mexico and the United States in Tijuana with 5,000 plus immigrants from Haiti, it is an indication of how Mexico is being used as a trampoline, let's say, to come into the United States. But we are having permanent conversations with Central America, in particular, of course, Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. Tomorrow, the two, perhaps I'm going to be a little indiscreet, but we're going to have another meeting. The Secretary of Foreign Affairs of Mexico was in Guatemala meeting with the other 3 foreign ministers in order to analyze how to face, how to confront immigration. Because the demographics of our neighbor countries, our brother countries, is growing up. And if you put together additionally what is happening with violence and drought, so the combination is for people to continue coming, trying to come to the United States, not to the United States, but to Mexico. Every year we have an event. It is with the intention of making citizens or taking oath to people from Central America or parts of the world, which is great. But what we are intending to do now is to help into developing infrastructure and jobs in those nations that are besides us, that are neighbors to us. And that is the challenge. So this is a joint effort between the United States, Mexico, and Central American countries in particular. So, and I just want to mention some phrases about NAFTA because it has been put under a lot of stress. We see that when you see, and I mentioned deliberately, that just Tennessee, which is a state south but north, there is 100,000 jobs being created because of exports to Mexico. And the jobs that are produced by exporting, it is better paid. But if you take all the free trade agreements of the United States, and I conclude this, if you take all of them, the countries with which the United States have agreements, there is a surplus for the United States, but not with the rest that they do not have free trade agreements. So we think always as a region, the United States, Mexico, and Canada, but that is the way that we see how we can progress against other regions of the world.
Thank you. Speaking of trade deals, Maria Elena, you mentioned we need better trade deals, and trade deals were obviously one of the big focuses of the campaign that we just came out of. So you mentioned earlier we need better trade deals. And I'd like to ask you, Maria Elena, what do you mean? What kind of better trade deals do we need? And how can immigrants and refugees be part of that conversation?
Well, we need to be honest about who benefits from trade deals. Donald Trump was talking about fair trade deals while he was having all of his products produced in other parts of the world. So that's not an honest conversation. If you really care about workers, you're not going to oppose increasing the minimum wage. If you really care about jobs here in this country and good paying jobs, you're not going to have your products, your products made in other countries without looking out for the well-being here. So I think I don't think it's that complicated. We just have to see who benefits the most. And rather than a trickle down, we need to have a much more balanced as far as the interest of workers and issues like environment and everything else. And there's a lot of technical issues in the trade deals, but we do know one thing, is they haven't been as fair to workers in this country. And I don't think that's necessarily the fault of the countries with whom we do the trade deals. It's the fault of this government for not making sure that workers' interests are included as much as corporate interests. But I do think that it's important, that a lot of times, without a doubt, we know we've had this history in this country over and over and over again where native-born workers are made to feel like it is the fault of immigrant workers coming here who take their jobs, who lower the standards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we have to talk about economic issues in a way that puts everybody on the same level. And because there's an imbalance of power in the economy, the immigration laws also reflect an imbalance of power. When employers have power over workers, especially immigrant workers, and their rights to demand more in wages, their rights to collectively bargain, then that's something that certainly affects the standards. And white workers get thrown off because they figure it's easier to point at a black worker or an immigrant worker or a woman worker. And that's just been the history in this country. We have to do a better job of, when we talk about immigration, it's an economic issue. It is not purely a racial issue. It's used as a racist way. It's used to pit workers against each other. But it is all about the economy. When we fix this broken immigration system, and I don't mean just around the edges, but when we completely overhaul the immigration system in this country, then we're going to bring up immigrant workers, we're going to bring up all workers, they're all going to be treated the same, they're all going to have the same rights, they won't have to worry about being deported in order to stand up for their economic rights. And I think that's how we need to talk about whatever issues are in this economy. It's not about an immigrant taking someone's job, but it's about having a better economy and better jobs for everybody across the board. That's what the labor movement is all about.
Yeah. And so just to follow up on that, has the immigrant rights movement done enough to do that? And what's the biggest obstacle for us to be able to do that? Because I have heard that sentiment a lot in a lot of different sectors.
Well, I think what's important, and we have an opportunity going forward, that, for example, when we talk and we fight about DACA and sanctuary and safe zones, we ought to be as demanding about it as on the campuses and for students as we are. We should do that for workers on those campuses. And right now, the way that it's being accepted is to talk about students, DACA beneficiaries as students, but we're not talking about DACA beneficiaries as workers. And I think we need to make sure that that's as much in the heart of our conversation right now, that on the campuses, the landscapers, even the faculty, the food service workers, they all should have a safe zone. The campuses should not allow ICE to come onto campuses and threaten and try to deport anybody. I don't care if you're a student or a landscaper or a dishwasher. That's the safe zone that we need to be talking about. So I think as we move forward, our immigration movement, our immigrants movement, needs to be sure that we include rights on the job, demand this from employer. I don't care if you're Facebook or if you're a hotel or you're anywhere else. You have got to provide and take on ICE. Take them on and don't allow them into our workplaces as much as our campuses.
Thank you, Maria Elena. So this issue of scapegoating, I think it's an issue that's obviously on the rise now. I think the atmosphere here in the United States, it looks like we're going to see the Muslim registry and special registration coming again. And you talked about the rise of far-right movements in Europe. Is there some light on the horizon? What are some lessons that we can actually find in order to stop what seems like a very dark time coming?
Absolutely. I mean, if you had asked me a couple of weeks ago, I might have hesitated a little bit more. But there definitely is, and I think we've heard it throughout this conference that local and state fights are going to matter so much. And right when we heard about this new, which is not new, Muslim registry or Muslim ban happening again, there were a lot of well-meaning people, well-meaning allies who'd say, well, I'd be the first to sign up in order to diffuse the impact on the Muslim community. And instead of accepting this as an inevitability, we've got thousands of activists right now in DC fighting to make sure it doesn't get reinstated, fighting to make sure that Chris Kobach's NSEER's plan does not become policy once again. And that also, we know that the far right is a clear target. What we don't tend to talk about as much is how much the rest of the political establishment has also furthered Islamophobia and anti-immigrant policy. We can recognize the rhetoric when it happens. Are we doing the same with the policy? Are we pushing our progressive and liberal leaders as much to make sure that they don't institute policy that harms community while they're saying the nice words about inclusivity and diversity? Right, so that's something I really, really want all of us to be more mindful about when we hear these things, the niceties. Also investigate what's one layer beneath that. And what we've seen over the last 15 years, at least, is that Islamophobia is not just a problem for the Muslim community. It's becoming a problem for all of us, and it's showing up in the way that the Border Patrol operates, right? Where is this militarized equipment coming from? How is that being justified? What about, all the pictures that we saw in Ferguson, and we saw tanks in the background? This is part of this war on terrorism that's coming into our communities. And we have to call it what it is, and we have to name it, and we have to really understand that in order to better fight it. And so I know a lot of us are uncomfortable about talking about religion or anything just things around Islamophobia. It's been really uncomfortable. But if we look at it just from a racial justice and an immigrant rights and a social justice perspective, and what are the just basic rights that should be afforded to us all, let's make sure we're not reproducing some of these discriminations within our movements in our community.
Thank you, Clea. Ambassador Sada, I wanted to shift the conversation a little bit. Think about the global perspective here. With the Trump election, it really is a new horizon in terms of international relations. And I wanted to get your sense of how is a President Trump and a Trump administration, how is that going to affect international relations such as with Mexico? What is the future that you're seeing there?
Throughout our history, we have been facing different situations, and we have always worked with whoever people decide to be in the positions that are decisive. And it is not different right now. So what we are trying to do is, in Mexico, to have the policies and the strategies that are convenient for the people of Mexico, and of course, for our partners. When it is said that there's going to be changes in the international scenario and the deals that are cut with different countries, well, we're waiting to see. what is happening. But we emphasize a lot that before doing that, it is important to learn what is happening and what is at stake. And Mexico has been, not just in this occasion, but in general, we have been in the hot seat. So Mexico is the epicenter of a lot of political campaigns in this nation. And I think there is a need to put in perspective the relationship, judging from the international scenario. When you have a country that it is not only your neighbor and friend, but it is your best partner and your very important strategic ally. So that is what we want to send as a message to the people that are coming to the new administration. And that is so crucial, because there is no other country in the world that has a shared production as the United States and Mexico have. The second one is with 40%. So we are doing business together. And we have had better accessibility to different products and produces because we are producing from that perspective. There is, as I said, no other country in this world. 40% of total integration, 25% with Canada, and then drops to 2 or 3% with other countries. So how is it going to be the international policies of this new administration? We don't know. But what we do know is there is the need of learning and understanding the relationship that exists with Mexico. That is on one hand. On the other hand, it is immigration. That, of course, it is very distortion. And there is, on one hand, reality, and there is, on the other hand, perception. And we need people to understand and to learn what is really happening in these two fronts. When they say that there is 11.5 million undocumented immigrants, immediately everybody thinks that all of them are from Mexico. That you know, and that some of us know that it is not true. That is perhaps half of them, and the rest are from the rest of the world. So what it is important is that before making decisions, to have the facts, and from there to analyze. We are doing our best in order to do so, and I think that people in this audience are also very sensitive to the issue of immigration, and also how to produce more jobs. When you say that there is 5 million jobs being created in the United States because of the relationship with Mexico, and 33, 34 of the states in the United States is number 1, 2, or 3 business partner with Mexico exporter to Mexico. That is what is to be considered also. Where are the facts and how are the facts and how you are going to see the future? Our policy, it is not isolationism. It is openness. And we think that at least for our country and for the region that we're working with, it is so important to conceive that perspective from different points of view, so that Mexico, it is not perceived as the enemy at all, but also a very reliable partner from different perspectives.
Thank you. So I feel like we've only just scratched the surface of this conversation, talking about not only immigration, but also economic justice and globalization and Islamophobia. If I'd like to ask the speakers to just give one message. If there's one message that you want the folks here to come out of this plenary session, what would that be? So if we can start with you, Maria Elena.
Well, I would say that we take this opportunity nationwide the way we took the opportunity in California. And in California, it wasn't just a reaction to Prop 187 and Pete Wilson. It was a decision to create a whole new environment. It was a decision to invest on a long-term basis, to make the change for immigrants as human beings, as residents, to become citizens, and to create a whole new way of doing things, to change the culture, to change the electorate, not just by saying we have this many more immigrants, and to really build something with the ideals of inclusion, rights, and justice. And I think that's an opportunity that we have across this country, that we're not going to run away from whatever the new president is going to do. We're going to take it head on. we're going to take it head on, and we're going to invest in our communities in a way that we have never invested in our communities. And I just want to end by saying, you know, we always say the Pledge of Allegiance, I think just because we memorized it as kids, and there are events where we have this, but I take it very serious, and I think that we need to have that really become something that we truly believe in. You know, that we pledge allegiance to a republic, one nation under God, not just a Christian God, but any name that we name our God, that we would truly be indivisible, that we would truly see the commonality amongst our communities and embrace those commonalities with liberty and justice for all, that we will fight to make sure that every human being in this country is treated with the respect, has the justice that they deserve, and anyone who comes in the future will be treated the way as somebody who's been here for 5 generations or 10 generations. That's it. Those are ideals moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Elena. Kalia.
Yeah, I think one thing that we all are starting to realize a lot more is that we've got to work together. We've got to work across issue areas. We can't afford anymore to be single issue people. It's not going to work. And I think there's a reason that the state level proponents of anti-Muslim bills have also been responsible for anti-immigrant, anti-labor, anti-LGBTQ, anti-woman, right? This is across the board. They're working together, and I don't want to only be led by our fear of the other side or what they're doing, but it benefits us also, right? And there's a lot we can learn about their strategies and how to employ them with good instead of whatever it is that they are employing their strategies with. So I think, you know, in order to do that, we've got to really work together, and we have to be able to name what it is that we're fighting against and what we're fighting for.
Thank you, Kalia. Ambassador Sada.
I think we have to see a dual vision or perspective. On one hand, of course, we are, as I mentioned, as the government of Mexico, this nation to protect the interests of Mexican people and all immigrants, because we are together in this. And it is so crucial that there is not unfairness, that there is fair treatment of everybody, and we are really ready to face that situation. But at the same time, we cannot just continue working on how to play domestically, but how to open more jobs. In this case, of course, the US is concerned about how to give better jobs and more jobs to the people here, which is the same concern that we have in Mexico. But there is a conviction in my country that only by working together we can compete. If we do not produce jobs together, we're going to lose ground against the rest of the world. When NAFTA started 22 years ago, we, the three of us, including Canada, we represented almost 20% of world trade. Nowadays, we only represent 15%. So we are losing opportunities and jobs, not from Mexico, not from Canada, because we are not being so aggressive in other scenarios. Of course, protecting the rights of people, protecting employment, good paying jobs, that by the way, exporting jobs are the best paid jobs everywhere. So that is our vision. How do we put together the two variables? Of course, immigration, that hopefully so, is not going to be like it is said it's going to be, but we are ready to confront whatever is coming, not only with our consulates, but with the rest of the organizations that are here present. And I offer you alliances in that sense. But indeed, what else do we have to do? How do we want to see the world in the years to come?
Thank you. Thank you to all of the plenary speakers. Thank you to Maria Elena Durazo, Kalia Abiade, and of course, Ambassador Carlos Sada. And please join me in welcoming Co-Executive Director Lindsay Harris of Turk to the stage.